Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. If you're like me, you have made a ton of things using these Dollar Tree boxes and have a ton of the lids left. I wanted to use the lids that I have in my stash. I used tumbling tower blocks and hot glued them around the lids. For this box, I used a block as a spacer and then went all the way around the lid. I went back in and glued blocks between the previous blocks, but I glued them at the top of the lid for a staggered look. To make sure the blocks were secure, I added hot glue to the inside of the blocks. When I was finished, I stained everything with some gel stain. And just look at how adorable it turned out. On another lid, I glued the blocks all the way around the lid and added some wood beads to the bottom. I think both of these turned out so stinking cute. And now I have 2 less lids in my stash. For this project, I used 6 Dollar Tree wood boxes. You know, with Dollar Tree items, not everything is the same size or actually square. I used Gorilla Glue and hot glue and attached 3 of the boxes together. And then clamped them together. I then found 3 more boxes that were about the same size, but they were shorter than the first 3. Oh well, I can make this work. I glued and clamped this set of boxes together also. I placed the longer section of boxes on the bottom and applied my glue. Then clamped the top set of boxes to the bottom set. I let the glue set up for an hour or so. The next thing I did was figure out which drawer went with each box. This was a tricky process, and I would suggest keeping the box and drawer together. It took me a while to figure out which drawer fit into each of the boxes. After I got it figured out, I removed the boxes and set them to the side in the order that they would need to go back into the boxes. I wanted the piece to look like it was made, not just glued together. So I used some Dollar Tree spackling and applied it into all the holes between the boxes and let it dry. While the spackling dried, I used a sanding block and sanded all the drawers. And painted them with Waverly plaster chalk paint. I painted both the inside and the outside of each box. If you would like to help support my channel and help me continue to make DIYs for you, please consider buying me a coffee. All the information is in the description box below. Now back to the DIYs. After the spackling was dry, I used a 220 grit sandpaper and sanded down all the spackling until it was smooth. And then painted all the boxes with the same paint I used on the drawers. And since we all know how to paint, I'm not going to bore you with this process. I used these half beads from Amazon as the knobs for the drawers. I'll leave a link in the description for these. I saw another crafter do this trick and thought I would see if it worked. I placed the beads on a piece of painter's tape and painted them. The trick actually worked pretty well. I had 3 of these frames with the tags at the bottom. I removed the tags from the frames so I could use them on some of the drawers. I used Waverly Mineral Chalk Paint to distress the boxes and the drawers. I applied the paint lightly using a chippy brush and the dry brush method. Don't ask me why, but for some reason I also distressed inside of the boxes. I then decided which drawers to put the tags on and attached them using a small screwdriver. The final step was to attach the half beads to the drawers with hot glue. These little boxes turned out so stinking cute. And they really will look amazing on my living room shelf. Let me know in the comments what you think of these adorable little drawers. Today's video is part of the monthly What Would You Make collab hosted by Zana from OK at Home DIY and Connie from Connie's Creative Creations. This month's co-host is the sweet Ellie with DIY from House to Home. Be sure to check out each of their channels along with this month's playlist. You'll find all the links in the description. Now for another What Would You Make DIY. I used 2 Dollar Tree crates and glued them together with hot glue. To clean up the crates, I used a small piece of 220 grit sandpaper. Painted the crates with 2 coats of Waverly white chalk paint. I cut down and hot glued some skewers to the crates to make them look like little drawers and to give them a little bit of dimension. And then added another layer of white chalk paint. I added hot glue to the top of the crates and placed a Target Bullseye wood tray. Painted 2 half beads from my Amazon store with brown paint. I used a ruler and found the center of each crate. And hot glued the half beads to make them look like little drawers. I distressed 4 small terracotta pots for the tray on top. I placed plants in each of the little pots and I think this little planter turned out so stinking cute. Let me know what you think in the comments. I cut down some wood sticks. I guess that's what you would call them. They were in my wood pile, and I thought they would work perfectly. I cut the 2 side pieces at 15 inches and the 3 rungs in the middle at 6 inches. Sorry, but I forgot to hit record on the camera for the first 2 rungs of the ladder. I looked up at the camera before I started the third and hit record. I didn't use any glue. I found these long screws in some of my husband's stuff and used 6 of them to put the ladder together. I came down about 1.5 inches from the top of the ladder to place the first rung. I drilled a pilot hole through the side piece and the middle piece so the wood wouldn't split, and then used the screws to screw them in. Once I had the ladder put together, I put some water in a bowl and added Waverly ink chalk paint and mixed it well. I stained the entire ladder with this mixture. I simply painted it on and then rubbed it off with a couple of baby wipes. Once the paint had dried, I painted the entire ladder with Waverly plaster chalk paint. I did what I call a messy paint job because I knew I was going to be distressing it. Once I had the first side painted, I dried it with my hot air gun. I held the gun close to the paint so it would get a bubbling and cracking effect. I wanted the ladder to look like something that would have came out of my great-grandmother's farmhouse. Old, rustic, used, and worn. I did the same thing on the other sides of the little ladder. I had seen another crafter use a Dollar Tree emery board to distress some of her projects and thought I'd give it a try. It worked great, but I think I'll be using it on much smaller projects than this. I think my sanding block would have been a lot faster. Once I was finished, I cleaned the ladder with some water and paper towels to remove all the dust and stuff. And just look at how cute this little ladder is. I've been wanting to do this for quite a while and have been rather intimidated by it. I'm not sure why. I thought it would have been a lot harder than it actually was. Okay, guys, I have to say, this is my absolute favorite DIY ever. I'm not kidding. This project turned out so good. I am super excited to share it with all my crafting family and friends. I used this Hobby Lobby 12-inch round and sanded it with a Dollar Tree sanding sponge to smooth out the wood. I used Waverly antiquing wax and a baby white to stain the entire wood round, front, back, and sides. I used a paintbrush in areas that the baby white didn't fill in. While the antiquing wax dried, I used my Cricut to cut out a stencil of a file I got from Design Bundles. You'll find links in the description for the products I used to create this. I used Oracle 813 masking film for the stencil. After applying the stencil to the wood, I used a thin layer of Mod Podge and a Mod Podge brush to seal the stencil. I have never had luck with stencils at all. So, let's all keep our fingers crossed. I wanted as little bleed through as possible and the sharpest lines that I could get. So, I tried every trick I have seen other crafters use. I let the Mod Podge dry completely before moving on. I think that is what I do wrong. I'm so impatient, I never let things dry completely. I used some Folk Art Pearl White metallic acrylic paint to apply to the stencil. And for my stencil brush, I used a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and a clothespin. I have done this before and came out with pretty good results. I like it better than the stencil brushes I have used in the past. I applied 3 layers of paint using the pouncing method. Like I said, I was trying to get as little bleed through as I could. I lightly pounced the sponge onto the stencil until I had my first layer complete. I used my heat gun to dry the paint between layers. Once the first layer was dry, I did the pouncing with the sponge again and dried it with my heat gun. And I then applied the last layer of paint and dried it. I let the last layer dry for about 30 minutes. So let's keep our fingers crossed that this works. I started removing the stencil using my Cricut weeding tool. So far, so good. I continued pulling up the stencil. It turned out perfect. I did have a couple of bleed through areas, but they were so small they are barely noticeable. I was just really inspecting it to see. I really wanted to protect my work, so I used the hard coat Mod Podge over the entire top. I applied 5 coats, sanded with some 240 grit sandpaper between the coats, and dried it between coats with my hot air gun. I let the last coat dry completely on its own. Now to assemble the Lazy Susan. I used this 4-inch wood coaster as the base. I stained it with the same antiquing wax so it would match the top. And I also left the little felt pieces on the bottom of the coaster. I purchased a set of these Lazy Susan thingies from Amazon for another project I just never got around to finishing. I placed it in the middle of the coaster and drilled 4 small holes in the coaster. I didn't want the coasters to split when I put the screws in. I then screwed 4 number 4 1/2-inch screws into the coasters. The hardware from Amazon didn't come with any screws, so keep that in mind when you purchase it. Now that the bottom was ready, it was time to attach it to the top piece. I turned the top over so the bottom was facing me. I placed the bottom part on and found the center of the round by measuring from the edge of the hardware to the outside of the round until all 4 sides were the same distance. I screwed in pilot holes and then attached 4 more screws. And wow, look at how amazing this Lazy Susan turned out. I simply love the design and the versatility of the Lazy Susan. I can't wait to display it on my kitchen island. And the best part is it spins. Let me know your thoughts on this amazing and beautiful Lazy Susan. I'm amazed at how simple it was to put together. I will definitely be making more of these in the future. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see y'all next time. Happy crafting! Please take a second to like this video and leave me a comment. This really helps my channel to grow so others just like yourself can find me. If you just found me, I hope you will join our little family by hitting the subscribe button. If you are already part of the family, thank you so much for your love and support. Y'all are the absolute best. Check out my new Amazon store for craft supply and farmhouse home decor recommendations. All the products I use from Amazon in my videos can be found there. Until next time, happy crafting!